We're in constant communication with them, and we are ready to come back and continue the work in our committees and everything on the House floor. We will return to legislative session as soon as the Democrats come to their senses and open the government. That is a necessity.
Have you met with Speaker Mike Johnson?
No, Speaker Mike Johnson and I have not met.
Why
They've
not?
made the decision. Donald Trump has not given them permission to meet, Katie.
Señores, MAGA Mike Johnson está en modo pánico total, literalmente. Como una vez dijo el expresidente de la Cámara, el republicano John Boehner, cuando un político entra en pánico, se le nota hasta en la mirada. Y créanme amigos, a Mike Johnson ya se le nota demasiado. Eric Michael García lo dijo claramente. Johnson está tratando desesperadamente de distraer a los medios con un montón de tonterías. Honestamente parece ese estudiante de secundaria que se presenta a exponer sin haber estudiado, improvisando frente a toda la clase para salir del paso. Mientras tanto, 20 millones de estadounidenses están a punto de perder su seguro médico. Y al mismo tiempo el gobierno de Estados Unidos está enviando $20,000 millones a Argentina para un rescate financiero. Y ojo señores, por si hay un argentino mirando el video, no es que esté en contra de ustedes, sino que se trata de las decisiones políticas en este momento en Estados Unidos. ¿Ustedes creen que mucha gente no se está preguntando cómo es que puede ser esto posible en pleno cierre de gobierno, en plena crisis de salud? Los republicanos MAGA están de vacaciones. No están negociando con los demócratas. No están en Washington buscando soluciones. Los demócratas están allí, pero pues están tratando de llegar a un acuerdo para proteger la salud de las personas. Y bueno, es algo que va a ser en vano porque los republicanos están en la playa. Eso sí, siguen ayudando a Trump a construir su salón de oro de 90,000 pies cuadrados. Pues bueno, Mike Johnson estuvo el día de ayer en una conferencia con periodistas y hubo una pregunta directa que le hicieron sobre los recortes que Trump planea hacer, incluyendo en programas de educación especial. Y bueno, ¿qué fue lo que hizo MAGA Mike? Se puso nervioso e intentó improvisar una respuesta. Miren esto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know the president moved forward with mass layoffs. We are also learning there were significant cuts to staff at the special education services. Are you comfortable with those cuts?
I haven't seen the specifics of that, and I don't know. I do know that each of the cabinet secretaries were asked to assist OMB to determine what the most essential programs are and what the priorities are for the policies and all of that. And I've been so busy on all this, I've not had a chance to dig into the details of each division and how it's happened. I know that HHS, for example, has cut some programs, but they were effectively all agencies in a triage situation. Because remember, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats turned off the funding for all these things that everybody cares about. And so the executive branch, the Office of Management Budget, has to determine what are the most efficient and effective programs. It's a difficult task. It's not one that they relish. They don't want to do it. Listen to the president's own words and Russ Vought's own words and everybody who's involved. They want the government to be opened. They're begging Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. That's how to make all this stop. They want this to end immediately, and they wanted it to end before it started.
Increíble, ¿no? El líder demócrata Hakeem Jeffries no se quedó callado y lo expuso públicamente. En MSNBC le preguntaron si es que había hablado con Mike Johnson para intentar negociar de una vez, ¿no? Y la respuesta fue clara: no. ¿Y cuál es la razón? Porque Donald Trump dio esta orden a los republicanos en el Congreso y en el Senado de no hablar con los demócratas. Así de infantil.
Have you met with Speaker Mike Johnson?
No, Speaker Mike Johnson and I have not met.
Why
They've
not?
made the decision. Donald Trump has not given them permission to meet, Katie. And we know that until Donald Trump gives them permission to meet, they're going to continue to hide as it relates to sitting down and negotiating a bipartisan agreement.
Para colmo, MAGA Mike intenta culpar a los demócratas, diciendo que son ellos los que no se presentan a negociar, cuando bien sabemos la realidad que los republicanos están desaparecidos, Porque Hakeem Jeffries ya lo ha dicho claramente, no en una, ni en dos, ni en tres, en todas las entrevistas. Está dispuesto a debatirlo hasta en público, frente a la prensa, cuando quieran. Chuck Schumer en el Senado dijo exactamente lo mismo. Pero claro, los republicanos no se atreven. Cuando Johnson intenta responder, termina diciendo cosas que no tienen sentido, con una metáfora muy extraña, con cocodrilos y con manos. Vean esto.
This week it will have been a month since the House has been out. Why are you keeping the House out if you have a lot of other work to do? Are you saying that you can't work on appropriations and other things while the government is shut down? And what do you say to Republicans in your own conference who are critical of this strategy of keeping the House out?
I've heard a criticism from, I think, 3 members on our conference call, and since our conference calls leak and they're always spun, that's the fact. You can poll individual House Republicans, maybe you should, and 98.7% of them will tell you that this is the right thing. Why? It's what you just said is the opposite of what I've said. We are working on appropriations. That work has been done in earnest. The next package of bills is being prepared. Appropriators are talking not just Republicans and Democrats, but across the aisle on that. And we can move all that forward. Right now, the House Republicans, I don't know what the Democrats are doing, but the House Republicans have been very busy. They're doing some of their best work in the district, helping their constituents navigate this crisis that's been created by Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. The Schumer shutdown causes real pain for real people, veterans, the elderly, people who rely upon these services, our rural hospitals that have been struggling. Our members are out helping them to access the rural hospital fund that we created and that the president signed into law on July 4th that no Democrats assisted on. Chuck Schumer wants to take those funds away. They're trying to make sure that the rural hospitals can access them because they know that this effort is underway. And so our members are doing very productive work. We're in constant communication with them, and we are ready to come back and continue the work in our committees and everything on the House floor. We will return to legislative session as soon as the Democrats come to their senses and open the government. That is a necessity so that the work can continue and the members of Congress can do their jobs. And that's what we will do. That's our commitment. It always has been. This has to stop. We're on day 13. This should end tomorrow. The Democrats in the Senate's next opportunity to end this, to change this and vote yes and reopen the government will be tomorrow. And I pray that they will do the right thing. And then we'll all get together and have our partisan disputes and discussions on all the issues that remain on the table for the end of the year. We're doing our work behind the scenes. We're preparing for that moment, and we can't wait for it to happen. So the question is for the Democrats. When will Congress get going again? And I hope they answer it affirmatively. Thanks so much.
Y aquí es donde llegamos al punto central porque los republicanos MAGA se oponen a la cobertura universal de salud. Ojo, no es nada nuevo, esto se viene arrastrando ya varios mandatos, pero el problema es que no tienen un plan alternativo. Yo ya se los he dicho muchas veces, la salud debería de ser un derecho humano, algo garantizado por el Estado. Sí, el Obamacare no es perfecto, aún hay primas mensuales muy altas, pero bueno, al menos es un paso a la dirección correcta, ¿no? Lo cual redujo el número de personas sin seguro en millones. Entonces, si los republicanos quieren eliminarlo, ¿cuál es el plan? Porque hasta ahora su única propuesta es repetir los mismos discursos vacíos de Trump. Vamos a bajar los precios de los medicamentos un 1600%, cosa que ni siquiera matemáticamente es posible. Y a ver, que también dejen de hablar un poco de las teorías canon, ¿no? Sobre las camas milagrosas y que la tecnología alienígena que cura todas las enfermedades, que eso no es política sanitaria, ¿no? Es pura locura conspirativa. Recordemos cuando Trump en su primera administración prometió un gran plan de salud. Y cuando lo mostró en una entrevista con Leslie en 60 minutos, literalmente, amigos, eran páginas en blanco. Después de eso, dejó de dar entrevistas con 60 minutos. Es más, hasta los demandó por haberlo dejado en ridículo. ¿Recuerdan su famosa frase? Mi plan saldrá en 2 semanas. Bueno, han pasado años y se siguen esperando las famosas 2 semanas. Ven ahora cómo MAGA Mike tropieza intentando justificar que no tienen ningún plan real.
President Obama, you have been very critical in recent days of Obamacare, and some of your members have called for repealing it. Do you support repealing Obamacare, and what's your health care plan?
We worked on repealing and replacing Obamacare back in 2017. I still have PTSD from the experience. You remember that John McCain famously did the thumbs down, and effectively by a one-vote margin, the whole effort was defeated. It's a great frustration of mine, and has always been of President Trump's. And we know that American healthcare needs dramatic reform. Let's just state it simply. Obamacare failed the American people. It was promised to be a great success, to make healthcare more affordable. It's done exactly the opposite. And it has been pointed out by everyone that since Obamacare was created in 2010, premiums, the cost of healthcare, have risen exponentially. It's skyrocketed to the point where it's no longer affordable for so many Americans. And the access to care has been reduced, and the quality of care in some regions of the country has been reduced. We have to reverse all of that, and we have plans to do it. The Republican Party is the party that has the plans to fix it. Can we completely repeal and replace Obamacare? Many of us are skeptical about that now because the roots are so deep. It was really sinister the way, in my view, the way it was created. I believe Obamacare was created to implode upon itself, to collapse upon itself. I think the people who drafted that, the architects of it, knew that it would not be sustainable because their objective was ultimately a single-payer system. They wanted full government control of healthcare. That's a terrifying prospect for those of us who believe in low-cost, high-quality care. And so we have lots of ideas on how to fix it, but it is very, very complicated. It involves a big percentage of the U.S. economy. Healthcare is entwined with somewhere, I think it's 15% of the U.S. economy is the healthcare system. And you can't just rip it out at the roots and start over it. It's a very, very complicated series of measures and steps that you have to take to fix it. Now, it takes a long time to build consensus in a legislative body to do those kinds of things. And we have lots of plans on the table. We have whole caucuses who work on this around the clock all the time. When I was the chair of the Republican Study Committee, which is the largest caucus of conservatives in Congress, back in the 117th Congress, we drafted a book this thick. We worked on it for almost a year, and we had a prescription for how to lower cost of care, make the quality higher, and make accessibility greater. And so we have formulated all these ideas, but we've got to build a consensus to do that, and we were in the process of that.
Y es que amigos, todo lo que escuchamos de esa boquita solo nos demuestra una cosa. Los republicanos no están representando a sus votantes. Representan los intereses corporativos, los que han financiado cada decisión, cada intento de cierre del gobierno. Todo tiene una explicación muy simple, y es retorno de inversión. Las grandes corporaciones que invierten e invirtieron millones en esta campaña política del 2024 para asegurarse de que una vez en el poder, esos políticos les devuelvan el favor con exenciones fiscales y más privilegios, están actuando. Por eso es que quieren recortar temas como la asistencia médica, porque pues esos subsidios cuestan dinerito. Y ese dinerito, las élites, quieren destinarlo a sus jets privados. Y si se preguntan ustedes por qué es que el gobierno puede enviar $20,000 millones a Argentina, mientras deja que 20 millones estadounidenses pierdan su seguro médico, ya encontraron la respuesta. Esas corporaciones tienen inversiones enormes en todo el mundo. Ese es el verdadero interés. No es la salud de la gente, no es el bienestar de su pueblo, es los negocios. Ahora bien, señores, les traigo una noticia de las buenas, de las bombas. Imagino que ustedes recuerdan el nombre Jack Smith. Así es, amigos, el fiscal que en su momento logró lo que nadie más en la historia se había atrevido a hacer, de acusar a un presidente, más aún de Estados Unidos, rompió el silencio, acaba de hablar. Y lo que dijo sacude directamente los cimientos del Departamento de Justicia de Donald Trump. Jack Smith el hombre detrás de las acusaciones por el famoso 6 de enero y por los documentos clasificados, amigos, ha roto el silencio. Y ojo que no lo hizo con una entrevista política, peor con frases preparadas, sino que con una crítica profunda, algo directo, algo demoledor, sobre cómo la administración de Trump ha corrompido el proceso judicial y cómo el Departamento de Justicia, bajo la fiscal Pam Bondi, parece estar no solo siguiendo, ya está en ese camino. Escuchemos de qué se trata.
The single only person in American history and the world who's ever indicted a president, the man you might recall who brought 2 criminal indictments against then defendant Trump. I am talking about someone we almost never hear from before, during, and after those cases. Former DOJ Special Counsel Jack Smith, the only federal prosecutor to indict a president. He just doesn't speak much. You might recall that if you remember those busy periods during his 2 cases over the past years. But he has now, the news tonight, made this rare public appearance. And it's with someone you might recognize, a fellow Justice Department veteran, Andrew Weissman, who also we should note is an MSNBC analyst. So this is big news, full disclosure, someone we work with. But when this hit, I don't care who he happened to be talking to, it was going to be a big deal because it was his first comments since all of this happened, and the person he once prosecuted as a federal defendant, Donald Trump, has become president again. Smith, who speaks in a very businesslike and dry way, you can prepare for that because I'm going to show you this. He is not jumping around and being dramatic. He's not speaking in sound bites, to be sure. And yet, in a way, he was still quite candid about what was his long, secret, discreet work as a special counsel prosecuting a former president who was also a candidate. And he discusses, based on the evidence and facts, he says, what is wrong with the Trump-Bondi DOJ today.
Once we get in a position where we start talking about maybe not following court opinions we don't like, we are lost. The attacks on public servants, it has a cost for our country that is incalculable. The idea that politics played a role in who worked on that case or who got chosen is ludicrous. Everybody who worked on my team was fired. Apolitical people who wanted to do the right thing and do public service. They brought somebody in who had never been a criminal prosecutor. That just reeks of lack of process. Process shouldn't be a political issue. People have to think about what matters to them, and if they believe in things like the rule of law, take that commitment and find another way to be part of the solution.
That's just some of what he says there. Smith first rose to prominence in 2022 when, because of his credentials, he's prosecuted war criminals, prominent people in the public corruption unit, another case that was tinged with political questions because he went after a then top Democrat, former Democratic running mate John Edwards. Based on that background, he brought that to this approach, and he oversaw those DOJ probes that resulted, as I mentioned, in the first federal indictment of a president. He dealt with the obstruction alleged, the hiding of classified documents, and of course, then defendant Trump's recent history involved in January 6th.
Appointing Jack Smith to serve as special counsel.
Jack Smith, the special counsel appointed to investigate former President Donald Trump.
He's become the first former president ever to face federal charges.
Charges are related to Trump's mishandling of documents.
Charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States.
4 counts related to alleged actions he took to stay in power after the 2020 election.
Former President Trump is angry about Jack Smith. He believes that the Justice Department is aligned against him.
Federal officials launched this weekend an investigation into Jack Smith.
That is some of how we got there. During that period, as mentioned, Smith did not do interviews. Legally, he could, but he never did. Not with journalists or television, but not with lawyers or other settings. He was quiet and only spoke, if you will, or communicated through those filings. And after he left and during what we've lived through this first term, this first year of the second term, we haven't heard from Smith much. So now there's plenty to discuss, both the case history, which there are legal ways he can discuss the parts that are not classified or secret, grand jury, and a president who is taking square aim at his perceived opponents through DOJ powers. The Judiciary Committee is now calling on Smith to go under oath with a line of attack, saying that now that he's essentially popped up, they still view this as a partisan and politically motivated history in those indictments. But but he is sounding alarm bells, and we're going to play more from this newsworthy interview. I have some more of the excerpts, but anything you want to say now off top to help us understand what you learned?
Sure. You know, there's the substance of what he had to say, but I think that for people watching this, I would encourage them to sort of sit down and listen to the whole thing, because in many ways, what's more important than the substance is I think you get a sense of the man and the person. He came across to me as extremely heartfelt and sincere. I think he's clearly been through a lot. But he mostly, when asked that sort of personal question, spoke about his team and what his team has been through. And so I really think one really useful thing for him speaking is for people to get to know him as opposed to the caricature of him. And that's why I hope he continues to speak out for that reason.
Really striking, because he, James Comey, others are facing these type of attacks that sometimes combine what looks like a break with rules and process to legally harass or even indict them. And then, as you mentioned, a kind of a public cartoonish attack that may affect how Americans understand what this was. Let's play another newsworthy part where you asked him to discuss, and he went into what he knows a lot about, how the DOJ works, what the rules require, and what that tells us about that new, unusual indictment of former FBI Director Comey.
This latest prosecution of the former director of the FBI. There's a process to secure an indictment. There's a process of predication, having some evidence before you do that. And again, I only know what I see myself in the media, but the career prosecutors, the apolitical prosecutors who analyzed this said there wasn't a case. And so they brought somebody in who had never been a criminal prosecutor on days' notice to secure an indictment a day before the statute of limitations ended. That just reeks of lack of process. And I think a lot of Americans do not see this as a political issue. Process shouldn't be a political issue, right? Like, if there's rules in the department about how to bring a case, follow those rules. You can't say, I want this outcome, let me throw the rules out. That's why, frankly, you see all of these conflicts between the career apolitical prosecutors I worked with, because they're being asked to do things that they think are wrong, and because they're not political people, they're not going to do them. And I think that explains why you've seen the resignations, you've seen people leave the department. It's not because they're enemies of one administration or the next. They've worked through decades for different administrations. It's just they've been doing things apolitically forever. And when they're told, no, you got to get this outcome no matter what, that is so contrary to how we were all raised as prosecutors. I think that's been the center of all the conflict.
He identifies the civic tradition there, and in the interview, he also mentioned that we have a comparison. If you go back far enough, we had what he refers to as the patronage system, where relationships and ultimately corruption trumped expertise. And he talks about why that's a problem in prosecutions or national security, why that hurts us.
Absolutely. That was sort of a running theme that he hit over and over again, that there is an apolitical process. And he really tried to not criticize the current administration, but rather to point out the obvious contrast between what is supposed to happen in an apolitical Department of Justice, regardless of party. And you can obviously then see what is happening now and contrast and compare those two. I thought that was quite striking. One of the things he did point out that I thought was some news was in pointing out that he followed all of those internal processes when he was special counsel, and the sort of tempest in the teapot du jour, which is the people on Congress complaining about whether Jack Smith was spying on them, was something that was not true, and that all of the processes that were necessary just to get sort of limited telephone records was disclosed in the report that he issued, a very, very lengthy report, but also was something that had to be approved all the way up the chain within the Department of Justice. This is something that there was a process that he followed. And so that was a real theme, that you just don't do things willy-nilly. You don't do things because you like someone or dislike somebody, that there's a process to follow. And that's what career people and professionals do.
Yeah, it's the rule of law. It's hung over this Trump era, and it's the difference.
Mis amigos, el mensaje es muy claro. Donald Trump y su gente rompieron la línea sagrada entre la justicia y la política. Jack Smith habla de algo que es muy básico. Es el proceso. En cualquier sistema democrático, las leyes tienen que aplicarse sin importar quién esté en el poder. Pero lo que él denuncia es que bajo Trump, y ahora con Pam Bondi al mando del Departamento de Justicia, las decisiones judiciales se están tomando por conveniencia política, no por justicia. Algo que es muy claro, pero bueno, aquí lo está confirmando. Ojo, no lo dice un comentarista cualquiera, ¿no? Lo dice el fiscal que llevó a Trump ante los tribunales federales. Hablamos del mismo hombre que se enfrentó a amenazas, despidos masivos, ataques personales, solo por cumplir con su deber. Cuando Jack Smith dice que todos los que trabajaron conmigo fueron despedidos, está describiendo una purga política. Ya sabemos que eso no es nada normal, no es nada legal, no es nada ético, pero lo interesante es que se parece al tipo de práctica que vemos en cualquier otro gobierno autoritario, donde los funcionarios públicos son castigados por no complacer al líder. Y el problema es que esta dinámica no se detiene con Trump, porque Pam Bondi, al frente del Departamento de Justicia, está aplicando esa lógica de lealtad sobre ley. Y bueno, Jack Smith utiliza la famosa frase, falta de proceso, falta de regla y falta de justicia. Esta crítica no apunta a algo mucho más grande que solamente esta administración, sino que él está advirtiendo que la independencia del sistema judicial estadounidense está en un peligro real por el precedente que va a dejar. Si el Departamento de Justicia, hoy por hoy, que ya está tomando decisiones, no por evidencia, sino por conveniencia política, en el futuro, señores, eso podría ya no cambiar más. Podríamos hablar de una persecución que nunca va a acabar. Y ojo con esto porque Jack Smith lo dijo sin titulares, sin buscar cámaras, sin gritarlo, con calma. Pero con el peso de alguien que ha visto desde adentro cómo es que se está desmoronando el respeto por el Estado de Derecho. Por supuesto que ya salieron los defensores del trumpismo, diciendo que es un fiscal partidista, que está politizando la justicia. Pero aquí hay un detalle muy importante. Jack Smith nunca habló durante el proceso judicial. Él nunca buscó ese protagonismo. Nunca utilizó su cargo para atacar a Trump públicamente. De hecho, esta es la primera vez que rompe el silencio. Y cuando lo hace, no está atacando a una persona exacta. Está defendiendo una idea de que las instituciones tienen que ser más fuertes que los políticos. Eso no me parece partidista. Eso me parece más un patriotismo. Jack Smith rompió el silencio, señores, solo para recordarle a Estados Unidos algo esencial, que la justicia no puede ser un arma de poder. El mensaje parece más una advertencia, ¿no? Que si se deja que la política se apodere de los tribunales, entonces ningún ciudadano va a estar protegido de la arbitrariedad del poder. Y eso, amigos, esa es la verdadera bomba detrás de esto. No se trata del famoso 6 de enero o de los documentos clasificados, sino que Estados Unidos seguirá siendo un país donde la ley está por encima del presidente o no. Pero bueno, amigos, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que Jack Smith tiene razón al denunciar el deterioro del Departamento de Justicia? ¿Qué les parece que haya roto el silencio después de tanto tiempo? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.